Welcome you all. This is Piyush Nagda, Head of Investment Products from Prabhudas Leeladhar. And on behalf of our CEO, Mr. Sandeep Raichura, we heartily welcome all the participants to this webinar. And today we will be talking a lot about the long and short AIF strategies of Avendus. And before we get into the webinar, I will request Mr. Siddharth Vora, who is Head of Investment Research and Product Strategy at Prabhudas Leeladhar, to give a small introduction of Mr. Vaibhav Sanghvi. Siddharth, over to you.
Thank you so much, Piyush. Actually, some words sometimes fall short of introducing the pioneers and veterans of the long short strategy. I believe Vaibhav has been in this exact industry and running this particular strategy for close to 17 years across DSP, HDFC, Ambit, and now Avendus. As we speak, Avendus Fund is the largest AIF in India, and their focus continues to remain on giving risk-adjusted returns, which makes sure that clients' portfolios are more resilient with the long-short focus than just a long-only strategy. And instead of speaking more about the strategy, I think the performance will speak for itself once you see the constant alpha and outperformance that the strategy generates against the benchmark index. And I think we're in really safe hands with Vaibhav and Andrew's team. And I'll just hand it over to Vaibhav to explain the product in more detail so that everyone gets the kind of confidence that's needed to invest in this strategy.
Thank you, Siddharth, for the quick introduction. From Team Avendus.
Great. Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, Prabhudas Leeladhar team. And let me first of all kind of welcome you all to this webinar and thank Prabhudas Leeladhar and the team to for having us on this kind of webinar and giving us an opportunity to speak on long short strategies, including Avendus strategies. So what I would do is basically first segregate my whole talk into three parts, starting with just first introduction, saying that why long short strategy is needed itself in India. Then probably going to what is all about Avendus Absolute Return Fund, which is low volatility, low risk product and a consistent return generator. And then moving on to the second product, which is Avendus Enhanced Return product, which is a relative return product, which is benchmarked to Nifty. And in both these two strategies, how do we use our skill set on long short to try and kind of generate risk adjusted returns? Okay, so before that, kind of starting on my kind of first session of why long short investing in India, let me kind of first give you a very brief outlook, not outlook, but brief history about our equity markets, right? I mean, you know that everybody kind of keeps on talking about saying that equity is a fantastic asset class, and of course it is. If you invest for a very long period of time, the returns you generate from equities as an asset class is kind of very good and kind of beats your inflation along with taking some amount of risk. Having said that, now let's look at the kind of numbers over the last 20 years. Now, if you see over the last 20 years, Nifty, probably if you take Nifty as a representation of equity, would have delivered you close to about, say, around 12%, 12.5% CAGR return. And maybe I'm a little optimistic here, but I'm just saying that that is the kind of number in the last 20 years somebody would have achieved on a year-to-year basis. Having said that, whether this number is bad, no, this number is definitely not bad. It's a great number. Looking at the debt investments comparatively, this is a good number, which gives you a very good 300, 400 basis points higher in terms of the return. Of course, there is some amount of risk. Now, the problem here, however, is basically for you to kind of get that kind of 20% return, you have to stay invested with that extended period of time. While everybody kind of pushes for long-term investing in India, tell me how many people would have been invested from point to point in terms of that kind of 20 years period. What we have seen, in fact, is that you get maximum investments during the years of like 2006, 2007, when markets are doing fantastic. And you will always see that post 2008, 2009 came, and 2009 you saw maximum redemptions happening. Okay, what it basically means is that investors actually go buy the markets when it is good, invest a lot of money when it is good, in anticipation that this kind of returns would continue to be generated in equities as an asset class, ignoring that on a shorter term basis you can there are a lot many variables which can probably which probably can kind of risk the markets as well. So again, just going back to the 2009 example, when 2007, when people invested lots of money into, say, mutual funds or in equities, 2008 happened when you saw depreciation about 55 to 60% into the markets. And then 2009, when people started redeeming, saying that, guys, equity is not our cup of tea, kind of let us exit. And post that 3-4 years, you saw again returns coming up back again on the equities as an asset class. Essentially, what we say is basically trying to marry all this into investors' behavior. We have to realize, or we have to understand, that it is extremely difficult to be invested in equities and remain invested in equities for a very elongated period of time, in spite of having these kind of big drawdowns like a 2008, 2000, and many intermediate drawdowns which were close to about 20-25% as well, right? And thus is basically where we thought that how is it possible then probably you adopt a strategy in investing into equities, capturing the opportunity of equities as an asset class, but at the same time try to kind of mitigate the risks around equity. Of course, the total risk can never be mitigated. There is always going to be some amount of risk at some point in time, but to a great extent, how can you try and mitigate that kind of risks is when we talk about this whole long short strategy. Now, what is this long short strategy all about? Okay, and let me kind of try and give you a very brief example. Say, for example, if Reliance Industries is at, say, currently 1450 rupees or 1500 rupees, I'm just giving for taking the round number. In a bullish market, when the market goes up by 10%, Reliance Industries also goes by 10%, and everybody gains that kind of money while investing in equities. But if the market comes down, one of the kind of thing would be that Reliance also would depreciate by kind of about, say, 10%. Of course, I'm not even going here into a stock specific risk. This is pure market risk. If the market falls down, stock falls down. If the market goes up, the stock goes up. Thereby, your portfolio is a lot more at risk because of the market movement. There are other risk factors, including, say, if you invest into, say, a stock like, just to give you again an example, an outside example, into something like a Reliance Infrastructure, or where, of course, the market goes down, you will get hit, but there is a risk in the company itself as well. So by which what may happen is basically, yes, the market goes down, the stock goes down. In fact, the stock or the business doesn't do well, and the stock further goes down as well. Correct? So essentially, equity comes with two types of risk. One is your market risk, and two is your stock risk. Is when on a directional basis is where we can see the portfolio can go up or down in a very aggressive kind of manner. So what I'm trying to say basically is that your traditional equity portfolio can be at risk because of the market movement and because of the stock individual risk as well. If you try and use long short kind of strategy, if I'm going long on stock A and short on stock B, what essentially I am doing is basically taking out, to a great extent, the market risk aspect of investing. Okay. Now, how do I do that? And again, let me kind of give you an example. If I'm investing into Reliance Industries at 1,500 bucks, which is the current market price, and at the same time, say shorting, say ONGC, which is at 78 rupees, or at 78 bucks, on an equal value basis. Or say, for example, I'm putting 100 rupees in Reliance and 100 rupees in ONGC. If the market goes down, you will find that Reliance goes down, but at the same time, ONGC also will go down. Okay, thereby trying, both of them, each of them offsetting, the market risk aspect of investing. Two, of course, because of our fundamental analysis in choosing which is the stock which we would want to probably go long on, and which is a stock which we probably want to go short on, is our skill set, and that is where we would say that we would probably outperform on both those sides of that investments as well. Thereby, what we do is basically you keep on generating very consistent return, trying to mitigate the huge amount of market risk aspect of investing there. Okay, so that's the kind of very brief about long short investing, probably into India. Okay, now let me kind of take you through this slide as well, which is long short strategies to generate risk adjusted returns. Now, if you see this strategy, and I've plotted, various different types of investments across the curve, right? Where it is a standard risk return curve, where least amount of risk is what you have in liquid funds and money market instruments, and thereby the potential to earn on that is pretty less. Whereas on the extreme high end risk is basically your equity diversified and your sector funds, wherein while the return potential is high, so is the risk as well, which is high. What we try to do with our using that long short strategies across two products is basically still, like, for example, one which is like an absolute return, which is mentioned as AARF, is try to generate returns with lesser risk, and whereas in case of ERF, try to generate equity plus return with equity minus risk, thereby actually mitigating the whole risk return curve. I'm not trying to make it a little very complex here about it, but what I'm only saying here is basically I just want to say that using those kind of long short kind of strategies into the portfolio, you mitigate huge amount of risk, and you actually optimize the risk to generate that return, right? And to be honest, in the last 15 years of managing long short strategies, the one thing which we always look at first before investing is the risk aspect of investing. It is always said that अगर पैसा बचाएंगे तो पैसा तो automatic बन ही जाएगा. So if you yes,
can you be slightly louder?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is kind of always said that अगर आप पैसा बचाओगे तो पैसा तो automatic बन ही जाएगा. So it is that if you spend huge amount of time into the market by saving money, you will obviously get or always get opportunity to make money during the market as well, right? And that is what our crux is, to mitigate risk, to control risk, and thereby make consistent returns by long short strategies. Now what I will do is basically, while I have given you a very brief why long short strategies in India, what I would do is I'll just pass on to Bautik to kind of introduce to you the products. And once he kind of introduces the products, is then I will probably go deep into those products in terms of the strategies. And after that, I'll probably take the market view as well in terms of market outlook as well. So over to you, Bautik, from here.
Thanks, Vaibhav. I hope I am audible to all participants. If somebody can just put it on the chat, it will be helpful that we are audible.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can hear you, Bautik. Yeah.
Piyush, can you?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bautik.
Piyush, can you please allow me to share the screen? I am still not able to do it.
I'll stop my share and then you can share yours. Yeah, Bautik, go ahead and share your screen.
Yes. Piyush, I'm still not able to share my screen.
Okay, can you do it now?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. So, thank you everyone for joining this call today. What I'm going to do is, as Weber mentioned, hopefully, what I'm cover is give you a background as a team and also speak about the two strategies that we have. So let me start with first the background of the team. So this team has now been doing long short strategies in India for close to 15 years, possibly the longest time period that you will find in this space with any team. So that is, I think, the most critical aspect. What is also very important is that this team not only has a long track record, but also a very, very consistent track record in this space. As you can see, as of today, we manage an AUM of close to $657 million. To put that in simple INR terms, that AUM is upwards of 4,500 crores. So at 4,500 crores, we are by far the largest long short fund managers in the country. In terms of the background, this team started managing long short in India when they used to be with Merrill Lynch. That time, Andrew Holland, Vaibhav Sanghvi, Piyush, who is the other fund manager, all three of them were of Merrill Lynch in India with around $500 million of long short capital. After that, the team moved to a firm called Ambit Capital and were with Ambit for almost 8 years. And while the team was with Ambit, in 2012, SEBI came out with the AIF regulations. And once they came out with the AIF regulations, for the first time, they permitted long short strategies for public monies. So June 2013 is when we launched one of the first AIFs in the country. And since then, not only do we now manage multiple AIF strategies, but we also have the largest amount of assets. As of today, this 4,500 crores that we have is basically split between two strategies. We have the absolute return strategy and we have the enhanced return strategy. The absolute return strategy in size is around 2,500 crores and the enhanced return strategy is around 2,000 crores in size. Now, let me quickly move on to the first strategy, which is the absolute return fund. So the absolute return fund as a strategy, the objective is very simple. By doing long short in the Indian equity markets, the target is to generate an absolute positive return of approximately 7% on a post-fees pay, post-tax basis on a year-on-year basis, right? So whether in any particular year, whether the markets go up, down, or sideways, our target is to generate a net return of approximately 7%. Now, if you look at the track record of the team in the past, in most years, we have delivered our targeted return of approximately 7%. In bad years, in a couple of bad years, our lowest single year return has been approximately 6%. And in some years, we've also outperformed our target of 7% post-fees, post-tax. Now, this is from a return perspective. I think the second important aspect to understand is risk, right? And ultimately, what you heard Weber, he spoke a lot about risk-adjusted returns, right? So from a risk perspective, there are a couple of things which are very important. One is, what is the kind of volatility does this strategy attract? And two, what are the kind of drawdowns or negative returns that this team has seen in this strategy? We will also be showing you the performance shortly, but just before that, let me highlight the numbers. The volatility for this strategy historically has been around 5%. And when you compare that to your debt mutual funds, it's not too dissimilar. So the volatility
But your voice is cracking.
of the absolute return strategy is very, you can hear me now?
Yeah, better.
Okay.
Can,
So,
can you just highlight the volatility piece once again?
yeah, sure. So from a volatility standpoint, the volatility for this strategy historically for us has been approximately 5% annualized. And if you look at debt mutual funds, the volatility is not too dissimilar compared to your debt mutual funds, which also attract a volatility, which is approximately 5% to 6% per annum in debt mutual funds. So the point here is that we've been delivering returns of around 7% per annum with a volatility of approximately 5%. And that 5% volatility is similar to debt mutual funds. The second important point here is negative returns, right? So if you look at the month-on-month returns that the team has generated in the last 7 years that the team has managed this strategy for public monies as an AIF format, in the last 7 years, we have only seen 6 months of negative returns. And as you can see in the last 7 years, we have seen multiple periods when the markets have corrected substantially or markets have seen enough and more volatility, including what happened in 2015 with the Chinese currency problems, including what happened in 2018 with the IL&FS crisis. Even last year has been difficult, and including this year when you've seen the entire COVID issue. So we've seen multiple periods. Despite that, in this strategy, there have been very few that we've lost money in. So what I'm going to do is that, I just want to highlight one last aspect before I give it to Vaibhav in terms of how do we go for deploying funds. So the important point here in terms of positioning of this strategy is this, that the idea here is to deliver approximately a 7% return per annum. Now, we have seen our clients allocate money from their debt pool into this strategy. Now, because this fund does not have any exit loads and it attracts monthly liquidity, what tends to happen is that investors tend to typically allocate your 12-month money or 12 to 36-month money into liquid funds or arbitrage funds. Now, we all know where liquid fund returns are today. They are approximately 5% pre-tax, which means around 3.5% post-tax, because yields have come crashing down. Similar thing has happened to fixed deposits. And as we all know, SBI itself cut fixed deposit rates just a day back. And now when I was looking at rates, even a 3 or a 5-year FD is attracting returns of around 5%. And the other option that we've seen investors allocate to is arbitrage funds. Now, even arbitrage funds are delivering around 5 to 5.5% pre-tax, which means you're looking at a return of around 4 to 4.5% post-tax. So compared to all these alternatives, we believe that the absolute return fund, yes, attracts higher risk compared to some of these alternatives, but compared to the higher risk that it attracts, it also delivers more than commensurate higher returns to an investor who is still seeking liquidity, still looking at flexibility, and still looking for yield in the current market scenario. So let me pause now. I'm going to hand it over to Vaibhav to kind of run you through some more details around this strategy. And while he's talking about this, I will also show you what kind of returns this strategy has delivered.
Sure, Bautik. Thanks for the introduction on the absolute return. So what I'll do is basically, I'll take you through very critical elements of what all is absolute return fund about. Just to kind of reiterate the objective for the benefit of all, absolute return has primarily, the primary objective of absolute return fund is to protect capital irrespective of market conditions over a period of time. And to, once you protect capital, is to generate around 6.5–7% post-tax, post-fees, and all charges in the hands of the investor. How do we do that is basically, while I briefly mentioned about the long short strategy in my earlier, comments, what we do essentially in this is basically, we generate that consistent returns by taking into positions on individual stock positions, fundamental positions on the long side, as well as taking positions on the short side as well. So both simultaneous positions we do take during the market. As just to kind of reiterate two critical components of equity markets risk. One is your market risk and one is your stock risk. What I'll do is basically I'll address each of these aspect of risk individually on with respect to this portfolio, okay, or this strategy. When I talk about market risk, what we do in this strategy, and one of the most critical component of this strategy is basically the minimum hedge of 30% into this strategy. Now, what do I mean by this 30% minimum hedge strategy? Is basically, say for example, today the Nifty levels are at say about 9,400 levels, correct? And for some reason, if we believe that the markets are going to say 12,000, 12,500, now that's a very optimistic picture to paint in, right? In spite of that optimism, the minimum hedge level which I'll take into the portfolio would be 30%. So at no point in time, I would be completely open in my portfolio, either completely long or completely short. The minimum hedge has to be 30%. Now, if I translate this into numbers, how would it look like? If I am deploying say 100 rupees into the equities, 76 rupees would be long and 24 rupees would be short, 24 being 30% of 76 approximately. And this is my starting point, okay? I cannot go below that level, and that 30% can move up to say 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, or even net short as well, depending upon our market view of how we look towards market. So for example, if we think that the markets are bearish, or if my investment committee thinks that, okay guys, in the next 3 months, the market is looking bearish, something like we saw in COVID-19 or coronavirus case, there are a lot many risks and the volatility is too high in the market, we need to kind of protect money, then what we'll do is basically take those level of hedges right up to say about pretty much to 100%, or probably bring down the whole exposure of the book. So the dynamic management of the net exposure which I take into this strategy is extremely important. That's one critical component. The other critical component is basically to take huge amount of cash calls when necessary. Now, if you compare any other portfolios or any other mode of investment like a mutual fund or an PMS, rarely you would find that those are the kind of schemes you will take a cash call, a big cash call. Here, because I'm not benchmarked to Nifty, I have the liberty to take that cash call to protect the money in a difficult scenario. So what we do is basically, if there is huge amount of volatility and if you don't understand the market, what we do is basically take a very huge cash call, just try to see through that, okay guys, this is a difficult market, we don't understand the market, or there is any binary event which is coming up which has the potential to move the market either ways. I'd rather would not be exposed to that kind of risks. Let the event pass through, we will analyze the event and then again go and back on deployment. Okay, so what I'm essentially doing is basically I'm mitigating the market risk aspect of investing by one, trying to have a very dynamic net exposure position, and two, trying to evade any event risk which may come about in the markets. And because of which I have been able to say, for example, in the case of month of March, when the markets were down 24%, 25%, I was hardly down, right? In the sense I was not even down 1% as well, right? How we can do is, how could we do is basically one, bring down the exposure dramatically, and two, take my hedge levels, dramatically up. Which means that I am not exposed much to the market, and thus I have been able to control that kind of drawdown. So those are two very critical components of market risk. Now coming on to the individual stock risk aspect of investing, and I'll just come to that, how do we mitigate there. Before that, I'll also kind of try and highlight the process of investments as well. So what we do as a starting point is basically we look from the global standpoint of view and try to identify our view on the four important variables like interest rates, commodities, currencies, and the outlook on emerging markets. Why outlook on emerging markets is basically why, because India forms part of that emerging markets. And it is extremely important to understand where emerging markets lie so that we can assess the potential inflow from an FPIs into India, because Indian markets are greatly influenced by the FPI flows. So those are the components we start analyzing from the global scheme of things. And then we come to the local side where we try to identify, how is our GDP growth, likely to be, and what are the sectors which will kind of contribute to that GDP growth. We do not stop there like a traditional manager. We also try to find those sectors which would be laggards to that GDP growth as well. Because we look opportunities on both the sides of the market, we will identify both the kind of pools of sectors, one which can outperform, another which can underperform. What my research team, they would then do is do a very in-depth bottom-up research and research in the sectors which we like or dislike, by identifying the best ideas or the best companies in the sectors which we like, and the worst companies in the sectors which we do not like. Worst companies meaning for any reason. It can be probably because of a weak corporate governance, your earnings visibility is not there, or in any negative catalyst event which might happen into a particular company, and so on and so forth. So we will use those combination of stocks, which is a pool of stocks, of long stocks and short stocks, to be taken into the portfolio. While we take this into portfolio, and there is a very detailed methodology, there are very important critical risk mitigation aspects on stock risks. In that kind of state, what we have as the limits or risk limits is something like, no single stock is where we can take more than 10% of the positions. No single sector we can exceed 25% of the portfolio. There are strict stop loss limits for carrying any position into the portfolio, something like a 10%. If it goes against the price, then there is a discussion which happens. And at 15%, it is just straight out of the book. Okay. So that is the kind of discipline which goes into managing the stock risk aspect of investing. So in combination, when I am mitigating both the market risk aspect of investing and stock risk aspect of investing, is where my performance comes, and which is right up to your screen, where since if you see from 2017, 18, 19 and 20, in almost every year, I'm beating the kind of benchmark, though it is not my aim, but I'm delivering that kind of consistent returns irrespective of where the market is going, and I'm only strongly on path of achieving what we kind of aim to achieve over a period of 12 to 15 months. I'll probably kind of pause here and and go back to Bhautik for an introduction on the enhanced return product, and then I'll come to the strategy of enhanced return product later on. Over to you, Bhautik.
Sure, Vaibhav. Yeah. Sure, Vaibhav. I hope I'm audible now.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Vaibhav. I hope the numbers around absolute and the portfolio details, and how do we go about deploying funds was helpful to everyone. Just give me a second, and I will be sharing the presentation on enhanced and some of the details there. So the enhanced return strategy, unlike the absolute, is suited at the other end of the spectrum from a client portfolio perspective. So what does that mean? So the absolute return fund, which we just spoke about, was very well suited for a client to allocate from his debt pool. Whereas the enhanced return strategy, the strategy we're going to talk about now, is a strategy which suits very well in his equity pool of allocation. Right, and I will very shortly talk about what is the positioning of this strategy as well. So in this strategy, our objective is very simple, right? The objective is that by doing long short on 30% of the portfolio, and by keeping 70% of the portfolio as a core portfolio, our overall objective is to generate equity plus returns. When I say equity plus, it basically means Nifty 50 beating returns over a long period of time, which means we want to generate high alpha over a period of time with lower risk. And when I say lower risk, it basically means lower volatility, lower drawdowns compared to what you generally see in the Nifty or what you generally see in other equity products. So that's the overall objective. Now, how do we achieve that? The portfolio is basically a mix of two things. We have the core portfolio, which is 70%. And this 70% portfolio has an allocation to around, let's say, 20 companies. Now, these 20 companies, and I will shortly, when Weber's talking, I will also share the portfolio with you all. So these 20 companies are primarily large cap companies. And these companies we want to buy, first identify, then buy and hold from a long-term perspective, right? And that becomes like a core portfolio. And it's not too dissimilar to what any investor would want to do, which is to hold blue chips or good quality names and hold them from a long term. And that's exactly what we are doing on 70% of the portfolio. Now, what is going to happen is that over a period of time, over let's say 3 to 5 years, which is generally the time horizon for equity investors or longer, what you generally see is that you will see volatility in the short term. And that short-term volatility is created because of global events, local events, multiple such events. Now, in periods like these, what we want to do is to use the 30%, which is the long short pool, to take a combination of long, short, or cash to reduce volatility in bad periods or to enhance returns by obviously taking a higher net long position in good periods or when markets are looking better. So that 30% pool is a flexible pool, which is available to us to reduce volatility, reduce beta in bad periods, or to enhance returns when periods are good. So if you look at this mix of 70 and 30%, what tends to happen is that from a positioning standpoint, we believe that this product can be very well suited in a client portfolio as a replacement to, let's say, a balance fund in, say, bad markets, at the same time, a replacement to a large cap fund from a return standpoint. So the mix of this portfolio is like, from a return standpoint, closer to large cap funds, from a risk standpoint, closer to balance funds. So that's the positioning of the enhanced return strategy. Again, I'm going to pause here, hand it over to Vaibhav to take you through the details of how do we go about building the portfolio in this strategy. And in the meanwhile, I'll also show you the returns and the portfolio.
Sure, Bautik, thanks. So again, to reiterate again, the objective of the fund is to try and generate returns which are Nifty plus returns with the risks which are Nifty minus risks. Okay, so what probably from this kind of standpoint of view, let me kind of give you a very brief overview of what this portfolio consists of. As Bautik mentioned, that there are two essential components of portfolio into this. One, if a client gives say 100 rupees, then it's divided, segregated into two pieces. 70 rupees goes into long only high quality portfolio of 15 to 25 stocks, and the remaining 30% goes into a flexible pool of capital, which is a long short portfolio. I'll take each of these components in a little bit more of detail and give you a broader thesis of how do we achieve or how do we come to that kind of portfolio, which you can see on the screen, which is the long only portfolio, a very, very high quality portfolio. So what we do is basically we start from a BSE 200 universe, and from that BSE 200 universe, what we do is we run through some independent proprietary screeners onto that. Screeners meaning what we do is basically we run some good quality ratios on that, and one of those important ratios is something called as operating cash flow to enterprise value. Now, when people might be wondering, why operating cash flows to enterprise value? Because we strongly believe on a fundamental basis that operating cash flows is something which cannot much be tampered around, right? And when we say that, if a company is able to generate operating cash flow and kind of cover the enterprise value within a period of say 7 years or 8 years, I want those quality of companies to be invested in. Those are the companies which generate consistent cash on the core business. And that is what we want to probably own over a 3 year or a 5 year period in terms of the screeners. What else we take into important in terms of the methodology is basically we do look at sometimes at return on equity. We do look at EBITDA growth. We look at PAT growth over a period of 5 years, and many other kind of important ratios, including your return on capital employed as well. By using this all kind of proprietary screeners, what we generally do is basically shortlist from the BSE 200 universe to a universe which is close to about 80 odd names, and from that 80 names, again, my research team from a bottom up perspective will do a very detailed analysis on each of those stocks, do a financial modeling over 2 to 3 years, meet the company management, attend the conference calls, go, access the, access the research on the sell side, and kind of independently do your channel checks to kind of understand the quality of the company of which you would probably want to own in that portfolio. After this whole process, we would come to a portfolio which is anywhere between 15 to 25 names, which we would want to hold for a period of at least 2 to 3 years. So that's about my 70% portfolio, which is a long only portfolio. Now let's come to the 30%, which is the critical piece of this portfolio, and which is the most differentiating factor in this portfolio. That 30% is basically a flexible pool of capital, which would be used in a different way in a different market scenario. And let me give you an example there. So for example, if we think for some reasons that markets are currently say at 9,500, and for some reason if we think that markets are going to say 8,000 or 7,000, again, it's a kind of bearish kind of view. In that kind of scenario, what I will do with this 30% is basically either I kind of bring that completely into cash, or use that 30% to try and create some short positions to try and protect my existing 70% long position, which I am already holding. Okay, so what I am effectively doing is basically, should the market come down, then I would fall lesser than the market because of my unique ability to create shorts with that 30% and to create cash or be in cash with that 30%. However, so for example, if the investment committee thinks that the market is likely to be pretty bullish, then what we will do with this 30% is basically try and use that 30% to try and take a higher position on the long side, and it can exceed 100% as well, because this AIF has a unique ability to try and to go and leverage the portfolio as well on the upside, should we think that the markets are going to go up, thereby trying to capture the enhanced return piece as well if the market goes up. So in effect, because of all these factors, what I'm trying to do is basically trying to reduce the drawdowns or the negativity to a great extent should the market go down, or if the market goes up, to try and outperform the market on the positive side. And that is where we say that using this long short strategy, again, we want to try and manage a risk adjusted return strategy, wherein for whatever risks you are taking, you are generating a return which is better than that kind of risk you take. So just to recap in terms of the performance, since the fund has been kind of established, we have definitely outperformed the index, but at the same time, my volatility, which is a measure of risk, has outperformed by 400 basis points as compared to your Nifty, which effectively means that it is equity plus return with equity minus risks. So I will probably again pause here and kind of either wait for some questions now, or probably I'll take the market view of how we are looking at the market currently, and then kind of come up or address any questions you might have. So Piyush, if you want me to kind of proceed ahead with the market view, then I'll proceed on the market view, and then we can take questions. Is that fine?
Sure, definitely. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So 2020, which the cricket parlance would say that it's a lot of excitement. Actually, this year has not shown much excitement, but that huge turbulence, in terms of the markets, in terms of the economy, and in terms of the sentiment as well. So while you kind of entered into, say, 2020, there was a hope that, because of the previous 2017 and 18, or so 2018 and 2019, where you saw a huge amount of turbulence because of NBFC crisis, starting from ILFS to very high rates which we had, and a tight liquidity environment which we had, and a very two dull GDP quarters, which are about 4.5 and 5% of the GDP. There was sense of optimism when we came into 2020, saying that, hey guys, this is a year where, now all the bad news is back, I think, and we are looking good to kind of deliver some good sizable growth both on the economy and to the corporate earnings as well. However, 2020 started, and the first 2020, I mean, we were welcomed by the problems in Iran, between Iran and Saudi, and because of which we saw a very immediate crude price hike in the first half of January. In the second, while that kind of stabilized, in the second half of January is when we saw the first signs of COVID-19 or a coronavirus actually hitting China. And everybody at that point in time thought, hey guys, this is something like SARS, which had happened earlier. They might have a very kind of minimal impact, but I think everything would be kind of stable. And that was the assumption at that point in time. 1st February was our budget, and the budget was, to be very honest, pretty unexciting. And if you see from there onwards, markets tried to kind of stabilize, because we actually saw from China the kind of cases plateauing, and everybody thought, hey guys, now this is the problem which is now over, and we should be good from here onwards. Till the 3rd week of February, when we saw that infection starting to hit Korea, Italy, and Iran. And then it kind of started to become a global problem, a global pandemic. And all hell broke loose. And what we saw is basically in the 1st week of March, typically, volatility, which is a reflection of the underlying sentiment and the risk aversion into the global markets, actually spiked up from about 14-15%, which is on an average basis, to as high as about 82%. Right now, this is the kind of volatility which we had seen in 2008 in global financial crisis. Okay. Now, just to kind of point out is basically, while this was not the end, we add to this, we saw that OPEC actually kind of breaking down, thereby aiding to the risk off. So all these kind of events actually culminated into March, and when we saw a very extensive selling by every quarter of investors, whether it may be FPI, whether it is domestic fund, whether it is retail, HNI, everybody kind of lock, stock and barrel kind of tried and reduce their positions in the market, thereby effecting a 24-25% reduction in Nifty in the month of March itself. Of course, the problems were pretty evident, and people were thinking about the lockdown, and starting to think that, hey guys, when is this likely to get over? And in April, people had some anticipation, hey guys, that the first phase of lockdown will get over, we will resume back pretty quickly in terms of our economic growth, and there was some amount of optimism there in April, and that's why we recovered some bit. To the dismay that the lockdown is not going away, and in fact the infections are kind of rising above, or high are kind of going up. Now, what do we make of all this, right? Let me clearly say that in the next 1 quarter or 2 quarters, the markets are likely to be very, very volatile, no doubt about it. Okay, the economic numbers are going to be ugly, the corporate earnings are going to be disastrous. Okay, however, great amount of which is to a great extent is factored into the markets. When we see what we are seeing is basically markets from the peak has corrected by about 30-35%. Okay, having said that, if do we think that the markets do not have the further room to go down? No, I'm not saying that at all. I would continue to remain to say that till the time we find a solution to this whole problem, including getting a vaccine or probably looking for a treatment onto this problem in terms of the infection. My sense is basically will continue to remain choppy, will continue to remain volatile. Okay, thus when people started with an assumption of FY21 as an earnings, everybody started with an assumption of about 20-25% earnings growth, and now they have reduced to a certain extent that it is going to be flat from the last year. I would be very happy if it is flat as well. Okay, so we are in an environment where your 2 quarters are going to have a major impact on the earnings piece. Now these are all bad news. Now what is the kind of silver lining to this? The silver lining is basically that the valuations on a price to book multiple, which is extremely important to see. Why? Because earnings, because they are distorted, you can't be valuing a company on a price to earnings basis when the earnings itself is dislocated or distorted. You have to value a company on a PE basis when the earnings are normalized, right? So you do not use the PE benchmark, but you use what is the inherent ability of a company to generate that earnings by using that what is price to book multiple of that, on that company. And if you look at that price to book multiple, what we know is basically we are trading between the band of 1.75 to 2 times price to book, which is extremely cheap, right? Now, what are the, you have seen these kind of valuations coming back in 2008, not after that. And what is also relevant is basically, let me kind of point out a couple of statistics that in history, only 6% of days are where we have traded between that 1.75 to 2 times price to book. Okay, just absorb that fact, which actually makes a very compelling argument of having being in equities. Two, that price to book multiple, whenever somebody would have invested into this band of 1.75 to 2 for a longer term, right? They have made, once things stabilize, would have made a 30% annual returns in next 3 years. Again, that's a very important statistics. I'm not saying that completely would come up again, but that's a very relevant statistics to keep in mind. Okay, so on a valuation front, we are kind of extremely cheap. We do not know when the bottom comes about. We do not know when the vaccine or the treatment will come about. But once that happens is when we see a very sharp spike up back into the markets as well. So if somebody has an investment horizon of about 3 to 5 years and is not worried about the temporary volatility of about 3 to 6 months, equity is a great asset class. But mind you, I'm kind of not warning, but I'm just kind of caveating that the next 3 to 6 months are going to be very extremely volatile. Okay, so that is how we are kind of looking at the markets from here perspective, and our portfolios are accordingly kind of positions rightly for that in terms of absolute return. We are high in cash, low in net exposure, trying to keep on trading and generating consistent returns, and in an enhanced return where we are only 70% net kind of exposed at this point in time. So that's the kind of outlook of market, what we see from here onwards. And I'm extremely glad to, or I would be happy to kind of take any questions you may have, in the audience. So over to you, Piyush.
Thank you, Vaibhav and Bhautik, for taking us through the detailed presentation on your long and short strategies, namely absolute fund as well as enhanced fund. We have a couple of questions and we just have last 2-3 minutes left for the session. So I'll take some quick questions. One question is from Mr. Urjil. When you hedge your bets, do you short stocks in the same industry that you have long positions, or it's across different industries?
Sure, that's a very relevant and a good question. It is not necessary that it is kind of in the same industry, purely because we are taking sometimes a fundamental view on sectors to be outperforming as well. Having said that, if there is a sector specific event which is lying ahead, we might use industry specific hedges, but to be very honest, it is not necessarily, it has to be in the same sectors.
Great. One more question we're getting from Mr. Samir Shah from our Calcutta team is, what is the model of hedging? I mean, buying puts on index or shorting Nifty?
Sure. So what we do is basically that we use individual stock futures, we use index puts, and we use index futures as well, both Nifty and BankX, to kind of create any short positions if you may want to. But my larger part of it is in an individual stock futures.
Great. Now, since you are into stocks as well as futures, one quick question on these lines from Mr. Jay. do you use technical analysis or just fundamental for taking long and short positions?
So, I mean, when you kind of make a decision, you look into each and every parameter, including, right, it starts from a fundamental analysis. We do try, and my team has, great skill sets in terms of doing technical analysis as well. So we use all, and including derivative analysis as well. So we use all the parameters to try and find out the most optimal stocks, both on the long and the short side.
So I think Vaibhav and Bhautik made some great points, and I'll just reiterate for the benefit of all the participants that the absolute return fund positioning is to people who are mostly on the debt side of it. A lot of people who have allocated their debt portfolios to the absolute return portfolio, and the enhanced portfolio positioning is to the people who are looking for safety of a balanced fund, but who are trying to expect a return in good markets what a large cap fund could do. So the positionings are slightly different, and based on that, one good question we are getting from Mr. Abhishek Agarwal is it wise to recommend your absolute return strategy to the liquid fund investors? I think the answer lies, Abhishek, in the positioning that liquid is the point which Vaibhav and Bhautik earlier made. Absolute is typically targeted to guys who are trying to get returns from the debt allocations of their portfolio. Here, the methodology has been slightly different, where they have showing their all the risk scanners. They tend to give slightly better returns compared to what a person can get from his debt return. Vaibhav, anything more to add to it?
Sure. So what I would highlight is here that on a risk basis, it is not exactly comparable to liquid fund, but on a return perspective, now, one question which I also saw is basically if a fixed deposit is giving you 5.5%, then why should I be investing into this for an additional 1.5%? But we need to understand that 6.5%, 7% is post-tax, post-fees, whereas a 5.5% of fixed deposit it is pre-tax. So if you convert that into post-tax, it will be close to about 4%. Right, so it is a 4.5% versus a 6.5%, 7%, which is easily 200 to 250 basis points higher. When we talk about risk, our drawdown profile of last 7 years clearly demonstrate what is the kind of risk management ability which we have to control the risk onto the portfolio. So if somebody is an investor over a period of 12 to 15 months, I can kind of, with reasonable confidence say that, you should be, in all likelihood would be better than the comparative, any of the debt instruments post-tax, post-fees.
Great. I think we just have the last minute left. One question coming from Mr. Hardik Joshi from our Ahmedabad team is taxation at the fund level or at the hands of investors?
Sure. Being an AIF category 3 fund, the taxation is at the fund level. So whenever the proceeds come after redemption to the investor, it is tax paid income. So he doesn't have to pay the investor into his own book. The fund already pays the tax at the fund level.
Great. So a lot of questions and still few more to go, but we don't have time. So we will definitely take all the questions separately to our RMs. Participants who still have questions can connect with your RM, and we will try to address them as soon as possible. And since we are almost at the end of the session, I again thank Mr. Vaibhav and Mr. Bhautik from Team Avendus for such a delightful presentation on their 4 strategies. And guys, again, we repeat that this session was the launch of Prabhudas Lilladher's distribution partnership with Avendus Asset Management Company, where we will be actually distributing their core schemes and showcasing it to our clients who are looking for this kind of asset allocations in their portfolio. So thank you once again, Vaibhav and Bhautik, and soon we'll be connecting more on these kind of platforms to enlighten and educate our clients. So on behalf of Prabhudas Lilladher, I thank all the participants for their live participation. And again, thank you, Team Avendus, for sharing such a great perspective.
Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Prabhudas Lilladher team, and thank you, Siddharth, for having us over, and it was a delight for us to be here.
Thank you so much, everyone, for having us. Thank you.
Guys.